Welcome to the Southside Blueprint with myself, Aaron Krahling, Billy Rabbitt, and Justin Tiede. Today we're going to be going over some recent regulation changes in the market. So kick it off.
All right, guys. So we've all heard of the 30-year mortgage.
Ooh. Yeah, pretty standard.
But what you might have heard over this past weekend or more recently, the 50-year mortgage.
Dun, dun, dun.
So
the 50-year mortgage.
Got it when I was 12 and I'm almost done.
Making mortgages great again. Mama. I like that. Mama. Making mortgages great again.
So President Trump is proposing the 50-year mortgage, and basically the whole idea behind it is extending the terms and lowering the payments to increase affordability. Now, my initial thought was you extend the mortgage 20 years, like that's got to significantly cut down on the payment, right?
Yeah. I mean, practically free.
Right?
Yeah.
It's free. Wrong. Yeah. No, so it doesn't do as much as I honestly expect it to do.
Maybe we should call this Mythbusters.
It could be, yeah.
So what
Mortgage
are we looking
busters.
at? What kind of savings is there?
So on average, it looks like the savings for, any house when you compare it from a 30-year to a 50-year is only going to be about $200 max per month.
Okay. Gotcha. What kind of note are we talking about?
So, I mean, that could be that's really with any mortgage, but the numbers I've been running have been off of $500,000 homes.
Okay.
And it's pretty comparable savings to, when you also do a $400,000 loan.
Savings. I like how you use the word savings.
Yeah.
You're only paying the same mortgage payment for 20 more years, but the savings.
But think about how much you save today.
Yeah, exactly.
So
I can buy Starbucks again.
Yeah.
Look at all the savings.
Yeah, so the reason that the savings each month, the payment's lower each month. The reason it's not
there you go.
The reason there's not as big of a difference as you might expect is because of how mortgages are made up, and that the interest is front loaded, and then the initial 10 years with a 30-year mortgage, the initial 10 years are largely interest. With a 50-year, the first 20 years are largely interest, and then that principal payment is stretched out even further. So it really just leads you to be paying a lot more interest.
So you had some real numbers for us. What did that look like?
Yeah, so this was kind of talking about when we get into the topic of how much equity people are going to be having, because most people keep a home for 5 years. 5 years is kind of that magical mark. Like if you buy a home, you kind of expect to stay in it for 5 years. Now it can go up, can go down, but that's kind of a good benchmark.
With the 30-year, they can generally get out with a little bit of equity, at least break even at that point.
Right.
Yeah, close to it, sure.
Yep. So what I did is I ran numbers for a $500,000 loan, and compared a 30-year versus a 50-year mortgage. The 30-year mortgage has a 6.5% rate, and the 50-year has a 6.875% rate. After 5 years, your total principal and your total principal and interest payments
with all those savings that you're going to get.
Yeah, right. So after 5 years, your total principal and interest. Oh my gosh,
interest.
Principal.
I'm learning this word.
Principal,
yeah, this is a new term to me.
Principist.
Interest. After 5 years with a 30-year, you would have paid $190,000.
Okay.
Whereas with a 50-year, you would have paid $177,000. So in those 5 years, you will have paid $13,000 less. But the important number is how much principal have you paid. With a 30-year, after 5 years of payments, you will have paid $32,000 in principal. And with a 50-year, that's only $6,800 worth of principal. Now that directly correlates with how much equity you have in the house. So after 5 years with a 50-year mortgage, you only have paid $6,800 of that $500,000 mortgage balance.
Literally like a little over 1%.
Right. Wow. Correct. Yeah. So what do you guys think about that?
Yeah, it sounds like big business is trying to capitalize on something, because it really doesn't make it that much easier for everybody. But it does create a situation, and I think Billy would agree with this, where people are saying, maybe we can't afford it, and it'll get them actually looking at homes.
Yeah, I mean, I think if it does anything, it gets us talking about mortgages again. people getting pre-approved or at least looking at options or whatnot. I think everybody's looking for a way to make housing more affordable. I think that's the that's the magic answer that everybody's trying to solve, is how do you make housing affordable, right? COVID happened, inventory went down, interest rates went down, buyers got all the power, started paying, started bidding, and all of a sudden, the pricing of houses and property values escalated. So now we're in this kind of like this weird area where how do you make these houses affordable? Because let's face it, a normal mortgage previously was somewhere around $1,400-$1,500 a month. Now that same mortgage is about $2,500 a month. So how do you make that more affordable? The challenge is that everything is relevant, right? So, car payments used to be $200-$300 a month. Now they're $700, $800, $900 a month. So, everything has gone up. I think if it does anything, Aaron, to your point is, at least it gets us talking about it, and maybe it just, at least starts the conversation that somebody says, I thought housing was unaffordable then, now that there's this 50-year mortgage, maybe now it's, more affordable. Maybe I can afford it. Maybe I can be comfortable with it. At least it has people at least exploring, options. But yeah, I don't know. I think in order to make this make sense, because, when I first heard it, I said, okay, well, then let's really think about this, right? So you have the appreciation over years and things like that. It doesn't really make sense, at least on paper today. But maybe there's something in the works or something that this maybe correlates with. And again, I think everybody's just looking for the answer of how to make it more affordable. The challenge that I see with this, guys, is that I see that it's only going to increase prices. You know what I mean? If all of a sudden all these people now start going to take these 50-year mortgages, well, that same buyer now can afford a little bit more. I just see it starting to push, the price of houses up a little bit more. But also, too, and I think this is going to be the what if, a bank now has to really want to take this on, more risk. Because here's the deal. If somebody's now stuck, and, we talked about the golden handcuffs in a previous episode, now this is really handcuffing them to this house or whatever where, during COVID or during kind of the COVID boom of housing, you could buy a house and sell a house within, 12 months, 6 months, 18 months. Well, now this is really going to say, okay, now if our parents told us that we had to keep the house from, let's say roughly about 7 years to break even, right? Between fees and taxes and, the costs associated with selling a house, 7 years. Well, this is at least push it up to 12, 15 years. You know what I mean? And quite frankly, most people, at least today, we're a very mobile society.
Yeah. So do you see that increasing foreclosures? Because people certainly aren't going to say, "Oh, we've got the cash to get out of this now."
I don't necessarily know if it's going to boom foreclosures because I don't know if there's going to be really a lot of people that are going to take advantage of this. You know what I mean? I mean, we see people probably more now than before where they're taking advantage of a 20-year mortgage and getting a better rate. You know what I mean? I think something, Justin, you had said, which makes a lot of sense, is that maybe for some people, maybe what this does is it says, hey, we're going to do a 50-year mortgage, right? But, because I'm more comfortable with that payment. But instead of actually going, I'm going to pay the extra principal that I can pay or whatever. And maybe that just allows more of a buffer for people where they can say, hey, or maybe it allows, instead of doing a reverse mortgage, maybe they can refinance out to a 50-year mortgage.
And cash out refi.
Yeah, maybe that's the play. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I would be hard to feel like a lot of people would be jumping at this over the very minimal savings that they're going to see monthly. It'd be different if it was saving them $500, $600, $700 a month. Okay, but saving anywhere between $150 to $200 on the normal, first-time home buyer or first that. I could see where it would definitely be a benefit if somebody was refinancing, taking cash or taking equity out. And then, instead of doing like a reverse mortgage where they're only paying interest or not making any payments rather. But, I don't know. It's very interesting, but I would also like to see how this couples into what maybe other legislation is coming down the pipeline. Maybe more tax incentives for property owners. Maybe trying to find a way to get some of these, rental properties out and giving somebody a tax benefit on that. But yeah, very interesting. At least, we're talking about mortgages, right. And I think if anything, that's the win in my books. But yeah, I think this is so early to see. And, unfortunately or fortunately, however you want to look at it, I think the administration or whatever is looking for any ways to try to find housing more affordable, because I think that's a real problem with most voting Americans right now, is that it's just very unaffordable to own a home. It really absolutely is.
Yeah, no, and I think you bring up a good point. I think if the savings you saw monthly were more like $500-$600 a month, it might make sense because it increases.
Well, but would we actually? I guess the magic question would be: is that person actually going to save that or put that towards their principal that they're saving, or are they just going to go out and buy a jet ski?
No, and that's a good point. I think it makes sense on the aspect of affordability, right? Now, whether somebody takes that extra money, and it's not necessarily somebody with the extra money, but somebody who doesn't have that extra money, where it still might be more advantageous for them to buy a house versus rent. But when you're only saving $100 a month or maybe $200, it just doesn't seem to make sense to stretch your loan terms out an additional 20 years. And I believe you pay almost double the amount of interest as a 30-year. So it's just not making sense to me with that.
No, I mean, I don't disagree. I mean, me personally, I think it does one of two things. At least it shows that, hey, they're trying to find options. But B, I think it has us talking about it. And I think
they should have done 100-year. Might have saved some real savings.
Right. The legacy loan, the 100-year mortgage.
Pass it on to your kids.
Yep. Exactly. Don't worry, your estate will pay it off. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, and there's lots of people out there right now on the internet. All of our internet warriors are out there trying to prove this. And, if you take the $200 and you put it in a high producing, stock, or if you do this or you invest it, yeah, okay. But man, having to stay at that house for 12, 15 years without being able to get out of it, that's crazy. And I don't really necessarily know if the monthly payment is the problem. Probably the bigger problem is that many people aren't putting any money down on a home.
Yeah.
The amount of people that are actually putting down 20% on a loan today is far fewer than it ever has been. And I think that's more of the problem is it's not necessarily that they can't afford the monthly payment as much as they have no money saved up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or they're just so, pulled financially or whatever that they're just so thin or whatever because they're, up to their necks or up to their, throats or whatever with credit card debt. You know what I mean? I mean, it's crazy. I mean, paying $1,000 a month for a car. I mean, it's crazy. It's tough. It's very tough.
It's human nature, so it seems anyway, that people are going to kind of buy the most that they can with what they have, stretch themselves. Very few people live within their means anymore, and this is just a way to kind of extend that issue.
Yeah, and I think that's the major problem, really. I mean, that's probably more of the problem than anything. I mean, affordability, things like that. I mean, we just don't live within our means. You know what I mean? I mean, it just so many people stretch themselves so thin or whatever, and it's like you set the bar for them, or you tell them this is how far they can stretch, and like you said, they get all the way to the very, very end of the cliff or whatever, and it's
I got some
scary.
I got some coffee online the other day, and it said, "Do you want to finance this?" So, I mean, people are doing these things.
You can finance anything nowadays.
60 months to pay off your bag of coffee.
And you could pay a surplus to have it delivered to your house. Yeah, I don't know. It's certainly interesting or whatever, but I guess it kind of couples to our next topic or whatever, and that's about the credit scores.
Yeah, so the credit score requirements. So something coming up soon here on November 16th, Fannie Mae is removing the minimum 620 credit score requirements for loans submitted through its desktop underwriter system. So instead of using a minimum credit score, the system performs a comprehensive credit risk assessment, and it evaluates credit and non-credit factors. So some of the things that we'll look at is, people's rent payments or, other things that might not show up on a typical, credit bureau report. So what do you guys think about that?
So bad credit and a 50-year mortgage.
Nice.
This sounds like a great mixture for success.
It's a good combo.
Yeah, so the desktop, that's their automated. So it's getting past the automated thing, and then it's saying that it can get you past that. But then what about the underwriting as far as, past that point?
Well, I mean, I think most mortgage companies will have some type of overlay or something that's going to help prevent that, or help make sure that they're making a good decision or whatever. I think where this is going, though, is that, there's so many factors. So when we look at historically what the credit score is, right, and the credit score has been around for quite some time and certainly serves a purpose for sure, right? But I think sometimes, and we see clients like this all the time where they've got, their credit score is taking a hit or whatever, but they make good money, or they just got a new job and they're making good money. They've rebounded. I would say almost like a life event, right? So they went through a divorce or something happened. They lost a parent that they were caretaking and they got a little bit behind on debt or whatever it may be. Now they're kind of rebounding over, but they're already paying $3,000 a month in rent, or they're already paying $2,500 a month in rent. They've been paying it without any issues, whatever, but maybe they got a little bit behind on credit cards. Well, I think what this is saying is that, hey, let's look at their credit worthiness a little bit differently or whatever, versus just saying that, hey, we're going to shut you down just because of the credit score. Because I've seen people with, superb credit or whatever, and they couldn't afford a house.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, I wouldn't give them a mortgage. I think this is that. I mean, but again, I think to your point, Aaron, I mean, this is part of the story.
Yeah, just because the number says a certain thing doesn't mean the whole picture is bleak per se. So yeah, I think that it makes a lot of sense. Let's look at the whole picture instead of just what this automated number says, and take everything into account. So do you think that'll allow more people to be ultimately approved in the end, or do you think it's just kind of smoke and mirrors?
I think it's going to allow for the individual banks to make decisions. You know what I mean? And I think, I think we got to be careful of that, right? So the whole point of why all these, rules and regulations are in place or whatever is to make sure that
less default.
Well, yeah, I mean, less default or whatever, but I think also too to set some type of guideline to say this is kind of the minimum expectation, but then also to make sure that people aren't being, misused, or people aren't being discriminated against or whatever. So I think what this is doing is this is at least allowing them to make the decision if it makes sense or whatever. But again, I mean, there's so many other factors that go. I mean, it's just like the whole thing about, medical bills, or what's accounted, what's not accounted. All these different things that go into it or whatever. Should somebody not be able to buy a house because they have a whole bunch of medical collections? Yeah, I don't know. Or student debt. I mean, that's another one that we hear all the time too.
Yeah, fun one.
I mean, at the end of the day, it's still debt, right? I mean, They still did. I mean, it's very unfortunate. I mean, that's probably a podcast episode for another day, but, talking about our medical system. But, if you think about this, there probably are use cases, or there are probably cases of people that it would probably make a ton of sense for the bank to finance them a mortgage. You know what I mean? They're already paying X amount of dollars a month or whatever. We hear this all the time. People asking about owner financing, right?
Yeah, a lot.
So I think, what this will do, or this will allow, is for somebody that makes sense or whatever, that, hey, they can afford it, they can pay it. They went through some bad issues, or they made some bad financial decisions previously, but it looks like they're on the rebound, or they've gotten themselves out of that slump. Yeah, let's go ahead and give them a mortgage. But I guess it also, too, at what interest rate are they getting it at, too?
Right.
You know what I mean? So kind of like the whole thing with the 50-year mortgage. Yeah, just because it's available doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to make sense.
No, absolutely. Absolutely.
No, and I think it'll be interesting to see how it's actually done, because what this is doing is it's not getting rid of the credit throwing out credit, readiness,
sure,
per se. But what it's doing is it's looking at a more fuller picture of things that the typical credit report doesn't always show. So I think there's cases where it can be beneficial because, like you said, we've run into people who can easily cover the monthly payment, but, they missed a couple car payments, or, it doesn't take very much to throw off your credit score. So I think getting a more full picture, there is, cases where it's beneficial. But just like with the credit score, it's not always going to be right. So
yeah, co-sign for baby mama and she didn't pay. Yeah, there's all kinds of stuff.
Right.
Yeah. No, there's certainly lots of different scenarios that go into play with this. But yeah, I mean, I at the end of the day, there's still going to be overlays. There's still going to be requirements. There's certainly going to be all those things, whatever. I think this is just allowing them to have a little bit more freedom to make good, sound decisions or whatever. And look, they could still do manual overrides. I mean, this is just saying that for pretty much their automated process. So
it's past the gatekeeper.
Yeah. So, I mean, and so what's going to do, or what this is going to allow for is, some of the other institutions that aren't doing, manual underwriting, they might be able to get this through or whatever. And it's going to make it where some of these loans are going to be easier to sell to.
Gotcha. No, that makes perfect sense. So, yeah, getting rid of the gatekeeper, letting people at least be considered that previously they said, your number's not at least this 620, so we're not even going to look at you.
Well, I mean, and that's something we hear all the time too, and kind of like what we were talking about earlier. At least it's gonna somebody that's maybe right on the fringe of that. Maybe you can get them up to a 650, 660 credit score with just a couple tweaks. You know what I mean? But maybe they're just in this rut, or they're building their credit score, or they're getting back on their feet. Well, at least now it allows for that conversation to happen a little bit earlier in the process, which I think that's probably the most important thing. Is at least it's going to start some more conversations where, you know what, maybe it doesn't make a lot of sense for you to go ahead and buy the house at this interest rate because you have a less than 620 or you have a less than stellar credit score, but at least it allows you to start talking to a professional to get a plan in place, to get that team in place or whatever that's going to help you get into the best possible scenario for you for once you are ready.
Yeah, 100%. So you've been doing this a while. So how applicable is this in everyday life? So like, how many people have you seen that, if it was just $100 or $200 cheaper a month, they would have been able to afford it? Is it a big population, or is it just kind of, fringe?
I don't necessarily know if it's necessarily like, can they be approved for the $100 to $200 a month? I don't necessarily know that as much as it is where I think people will get to a point where they might be approved up to, I don't know, a certain amount, and then they're comfortable with taking a lesser payment. So, maybe it's one of those things that, the 50-year mortgage gets them even more into a comfort zone. But again, I don't know. If $100 or $200 is going to make you or break you on a purchase of a home, I think you got to probably rethink or whatever, is that the right home for you to purchase? You know what I mean?
100%.
Because $100 or $200 is
nothing.
Oh my God, my transmission went out of my car and I had to go buy a new car. What do I do? You know what I mean? So I don't know. I mean, I certainly not to go all Dave Ramsey on you, but I think you got to be super careful of stretching yourself so thin or whatever. You know what I mean? Like I don't know. I think it's going to open doors for some people, but I don't know. I guess I'd have to really be shown the case study that this would make sense.
Gotcha.
I think with both of these topics, it'll be interesting to see, the credit requirement and eventually potentially the 50-year mortgages, how many private lenders actually implement these policies themselves. Because, it's still up to them whether they decide to offer these products or not. So it'll be interesting to see that as well.
Yeah, I mean, something we were talking off air on was, it's certainly going to be good for the banks.
Right.
You know what I mean?
It always is.
Yeah, right. I mean, it certainly is. And so I don't know. It'd be interesting to see, do the banks start pushing it? Just like reverse mortgages. I mean, lots of lenders encourage them, or not encourage them, that's probably bad, but they offer them. And I would say that product is a very use case scenario. Like, it's got to really make sense. And I feel like a lot of people abuse those, or they misuse those loan products or whatever, where they do make sense for certain situations, but it's not like a conventional loan, which makes sense for, 80% of people, 90% of people, where that might really equate to maybe 2% of the population. You know what I mean? So I don't know. It's super interesting to see all of that and to see kind of how it all kind of plays out or whatever. But yeah, I don't know. It's, it's neat to have that product, but I want to see more facts or really more case studies of where it really truly makes sense for that person.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, it does. Yeah, it sounds great for the banks. They're getting interest for a lot longer period of time.
Yeah.
More upfront. So hypothetically, people are still going to want to move in about the same amount of time. It might take them a little bit longer to move, but they're basically paying interest that entire time.
Yeah. I mean, there's no exit strategy. You know what I mean? There's really no exit strategy. So again, I don't know. I don't see that. And most of my first time home buyer clients that we work with, I can't necessarily say that any of them buy that first home and say, "Oh man, I just can't wait to live here for 15 years."
Forever. Yeah.
Right.
No, usually it's like, it's nice, we like it, we love it, but I wish the yard was a little bit bigger, or I wish, this, or wish that, or wish it had an extra bathroom or bedroom, or you know what I mean? Like, it's just, that's where you start off. You know what I mean? So I don't know. Are we going to see the whole, recirculation of, kind of like what our grandparents did, where they bought a house and lived in it for 30 or 40 years? Or we're going to see that again?
All right, maybe.
I certainly hope that it's not because then they got a 50-year mortgage.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Something
Like,
Yeah.
that bothers me, a lot. But I don't know. We'll just have to see. And again, I think if you can compound this with other legislation things where maybe there's more benefits to that, or you can write off your taxes. But again, at the end of the day, the only thing that's going to benefit is the banks.
Right. And then, it comes full circle. We see interest rates drop and then house prices go up because people can afford that higher monthly payment. Is this just going to be the same thing? They can get a 50-year mortgage, they can afford more, so the house prices increase.
Yeah.
Time will tell.
Yeah, time will tell. For sure. So scary stuff if it's not used correctly.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, no, I think that wraps up all the topics we were discussing today. Any final thoughts, guys?
I think that, like Billy said, there's probably a best case scenario for the use of the 50-year mortgage. Personally, for me, the savings doesn't equate to the risk that you're incurring.
Yeah, no,
right.
For sure.
No, I totally agree.
No, I'm excited to see that we're doing something, and I think that action, I think is the most positive thing about these two things, is that at least we're looking to be outside the box. We're looking for a solution. Affordability is certainly a big problem. It's something that needs to be addressed. It needs to be, because I think it's only going to compound and it's only going to get worse if it's not addressed soon. So I'm glad to see something. Don't know if this is necessarily the fix to it, but at least we're having conversations about it, and we're at least trying to figure out a solution.
Moving in the right direction.
Absolutely. So.
Right on. Well, thanks for joining us today, guys, on the Southside Blueprint. We'll see you next time.